Welcome to the Wrestling Fan Wrestling Show, our fifth podcast. I'm the big beefy boy, Shane O'Keefe, and I'm joined by a couple of marks, Johnny Martz and Ciaran Dunphy. Ciaran Dunphy. Where the fuck were you last week?
Not here.
Why? You couldn't handle the testosterone that was going.
I was reading up on the Rhodes family, and then to my horror, discovered that you'd already covered it.
You accidentally you just started, the podcast came on in the car one day. You're like,
what the fuck? I was like, I've been researching this for weeks.
You weren't booked, sorry.
I wasn't booked. Dennis Stamp style.
You're on pure Dennis Stamp. That's an insider reference. Today we have a topic that we kind of debated before we said that we talk about back and forth on and whether we should talk about it. But
we still don't know whether we should.
Yeah.
There's only one way to find out.
Let's talk about it.
maybe we won't talk about it.
So with the Iron Claw, which is the Von Erich family story somewhat, there's a lot that is missing from it. There is the recent passing of Virgil, who many people might know. Of course, Bray Wyatt is probably in a lot of people's conscience. He's passed recently. Jay Briscoe has passed recently. So we're going to talk about wrestlers who've passed and why they've passed so young, and possibly what could have happened
had they not passed.
So this isn't going to be a list of like, and at the age of 20 this person passed, and at the age of, it's going to delve, I think, more into the reasoning behind it
And the what ifs.
And may as well start with the Iron Claw because it's getting such accolades. I have my own opinions on it. I wasn't particularly pleased with the actual movie in itself, but in terms of it being a biographical movie, there's stuff that wasn't included due to...
Is that why you weren't pleased with it?
I wasn't, right, so I thought the guy from The Bear, what's his name?
Jeremy Allen White.
I thought he should have played David Von Erich and Zac Efron should have played Kerry.
Oh, Kevin Von Erich.
Kevin Von Erich, sorry.
A lot of Von Erichs.
There's too many Von Erichs.
Too many included in the film.
Yeah. But like I thought that the Texas Tornado should have been played by Zac Efron. I thought body-wise and stuff. And I didn't like the depiction of wrestling in it. As in the ring, it was almost treated like, oh, this is a legitimate...
Kayfabe.
Yeah, there was no insider info in that. Like, you know, in the wrestler when they're whispering in the ear going, oh, go a bit lighter.
Yeah.
Go. There was none of that in it. So it didn't give people a proper... I think it confused people because they went behind the scenes and then you have that guy who was playing fucking Ric Flair that everyone hated.
Jesus, yeah, that was the low point of the movie for me, I gotta say.
Yeah, but they were coming in and he was saying, oh, great match and blah, 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 whereas they didn't show enough of the stuff in the ring.
Yeah, I mean, conversely, I liked their treatment of wrestling. I liked that whole spiel that kind of, that Zac Efron made to Lily James when she's asking him about, like, it being fake, and he's kind of talking about it in terms of being a job promotion. Because I think, particularly back in, like, the NWA territory days, like, it was so regimented in terms of like how it was managed and how hard it was to actually get to that point. And those guys, like, it's not like, you know, people give out world titles now like they're fucking candy or anything, but like it is easier to become a world champion nowadays. Whereas when you look at like the 60s, the 70s, even into the 80s, like the best of the best might not get nowhere near that.
I had a mate asking just the other day, he was like, how many world titles, is Ric Flair still the title holder? I was like, I think John Cena's tied with him. He's like, that is such bullshit. He's like, how is John Cena tied with Ric Flair? And I was like, well, he's been wrestling for this amount of long. And then he's like, what about the women's champion? I was like, I think Charlotte's 14. He was like, she's practically new. How is she a 14th? Is when they introduced the two belts that it started becoming a bit muddled and title. I think Randy Orton,
but also
or Triple H 3 times in one night.
But also WWE started to chase those records.
They did. And also I will say, in that regard, I mean, when you talk about Ric Flair as what, like a 16-time world champion?
Yeah, well, he was introduced on Dynamite as like 21-time world champion.
Yeah, he is, I think, a 21-time or a 22-time world champion, but they just haven't
acknowledged some reigns.
What we operate on is like WWE brain, where they go, this is how many it is, but what they recognize.
Well, sometimes I think he was saying, say, if he was in Puerto Rico and the crowd were becoming too kind of violent and wanting their star to win, that they'll just lose it in that match, and then the next night it changes back over.
Flair famously, or rather not famously, because they tried to obscure it for as much as possible, but he wrestled a match in, I think, like the Dominican Republic as the NWA like World Heavyweight Champion, and I forget the name of the guy that he was against, but basically like, you know, the number one Dominican Republic wrestler, like, like in the same way like Carlos Colon, or like this is the guy who's the star of the territory and he kind of runs it. But the fans were fucking like
Johnny
going
Dragon.
nuts. Yeah, we'll just go with Johnny Dragon. Somebody's going to correct us. This guy, there's a statue of him in the Dominican Republic, but like basically fucking Flair like had to call on the fly. He was like, Jesus, if I lose this match, like I'm gonna get killed.
If he wins that.
Or if he wins a match, I'm gonna get killed. So I was like, he just had to call it on the fly and tell your man to pin him, and then like just follow up then with the NWA office and be like, look, here's what I did. I thought I was gonna fucking die. So
plus, like,
just scrub it from the records. But this guy in the Dominican Republic is running around going, I'm the world champion for fucking ages.
Plus, I think it's important to state that what would happen with the title back then, especially the NWA title, that was a national wrestling championship. So all the regional promotions would have their own top guy, and the national wrestling champion would go around to different territories and basically wrestle their top guy. So when you were given the honor of being the NWA world champion, it was decided by like a council.
It was decided by the committee. Yeah. They all had to agree on it. There was a lot of politicking and maneuvering around that, and I think it's really well illustrated in the film.
I was going to say that it was, yeah.
Like in terms of how badly Fritz. Because Fritz didn't become the world champion during his era and how badly he wanted it for his sons. But that stuff all really rang true because it was the ultimate accolade, and it really wasn't until...
Well, you also had to pay a deposit, didn't you, to hold the NWA belt?
Yeah.
25,000? I know Ric Flair...
But that was still the case up until the early 90s, because that's how Flair ended up going on to... When he made his WWF debut in 91, he was like, well, just pay me my money, or else I'm going to walk onto Vince McMahon's TV with your belt, which he fucking did.
And so I think from a historical point of view, that is showcased quite well. And obviously the pressure that Fritz put on his sons seemed to be insurmountable to them.
There's a degree of that, although I will say that like Kevin Von Erich, he's gone on record saying he's very happy with the film and the depiction, but he felt that the film was too harsh on his father, that his father wasn't that much of a taskmaster. He
did grade them though, didn't he, in terms of who his favorite was?
Apparently so, yeah. And there would have been, particularly at the time, where so like David Von Erich.
I think that's the problem with society these days. Not enough good old fashioned grading goes on between kids.
You can't grade your
kids. Do you grade your kids?
Yeah.
You can't grade your kids anymore because of woke.
Yes. Tragic. But that's the real tragedy.
That's the clip right there. No, you can't grade your kids because of woke.
David Von Erich it wasn't guaranteed that he was going to win the world title. He'd had this like run of matches with Flair. So what they would do is that you would have a run of matches with the NWA world champion, not just in your territory, but in a couple of different territories to test like, is this guy up to it? Because this was still at a time where like, for the most part, the NWA world champion was always going to be a shooter. It had to be like a legitimate, like someone who could hold themselves in a real fight.
Because if you got in a fight in a bar, as people would be like, oh, saying wrestling's fake or whatever, they'd challenge you in a bar. If you couldn't hold yourself up, basically the pressure was coming from the business that if you can't do that, well, then you shouldn't be.
Yeah, you're going to bring the entire organization, and you're going to bring the belt into disrepute. So that's why they put it on guys like the fucking hardest men to ever exist, like the Lutez's, Harley Race. Like, I mean, like legit fucking shooters who, if anybody tried to pull any shit on them in the ring, these guys would just stretch them to kingdom come. But like David Von Erich he was going through that process where they were kind of testing him out as a draw. As depicted in the film, he was generally regarded as being the most charismatic of the Von Erichs. So he was been basically kind of like low-key auditioned for, maybe a stint as the NWA champion. And then unfortunately he died. And that created the vacuum where it became clear because David died that, because they booked this giant stadium show in Dallas, and they needed to fill it, and obviously David's fucking dead now, so almost like the sympathy vote kind of tipped it in a way where the NWA committee were going to go, well, actually we should probably put the title on one of the Von Erichs, and then the competition was probably going to be, well, which one of them is and it's probably going to be Kerry or it's going to be Kevin. And I think the film gets that across really well, that competitive nature of it.
Yeah. So the film leaves out some things, though. And the film leaves out some things based on the fact that the tragedy within that family was almost too unbelievable. So there's 5 brothers depicted in that family, 1 surviving, spoiler. 3 of them that have... Is it 5 brothers that are depicted in the family?
6, technically.
In the family? So there's the brother.
Oh, sorry, there's 6 altogether, 5 in the film.
Yeah. So and only one of them
Survives.
Yeah.
Which is still the case. Unfortunately, none of them have subsequently come back to life.
But-
Kevin is still the only remaining Von Erich.
But there is a Von Erich that had been left out based
of
on
the movie.
Yeah, left out entirely of the movie. His story was somewhat meshed in with the story in the film based on the fact that the writer thought it was too unbelievable, the amount of tragedy that happened.
That the
with
film couldn't withstand another tragedy, and that would seem kind of like ridiculous.
far-fetched.
Now, I personally think that, like, overall, I kind of feel like that whole thing should have just been a fucking 6-part miniseries, and they should have done it all. In the context of a live action 2-hour movie, I get it. But Chris Von Erich's story is really interesting in and of itself, and I think there was just an awful, I think there was an awful lot that they could have got out of maybe including him. But yeah, like when you've got a bunch of brothers and they're all dying in the span of under 10 years for the most part.
Surely
I
though
can
you could just
understand
stick in 5-minute. So surely
A
one
montage, yeah.
Well, one of the dead brothers. It seems a bit. It's a bit crass to pull out his entire life.
They kind of they melded elements of Chris Von Erich with Mike Von Erich, who was also like, they were the 2 youngest. But what was interesting was kind of like in the film, they present Mike as the one who's like, he's into music and he gets kind of pushed into it. Which I think tallied with him with what he was like in real life. He did get pushed into it after David Von Erich died. But Chris was the youngest, and also he was the smallest. He had really bad asthma. He had brittle bones.
He didn't have the
He was genetically not equipped to be a wrestler, but apparently he was the one who loved it the most. So,
and it's Chris who's excluded.
Yeah.
Chris he's the youngest. Yeah,
It's like that sounds like one of the more interesting stories.
Yeah. They melded elements of his real life character with
Mike.
Mike, but but there's a real tragedy going. Like this is the kid. He's the youngest brother. He wants to be involved in the family business. He sees all his brothers become wrestling stars, and he's just too small. He's too brittle. He's got bad asthma, and he's just predestined not to make it. And at the point where 2 of his brothers have died, when David died in 1984, Mike died, I think, in 1988, and that was the point at which Chris, I don't know if he was pushed in by his dad, but you're going to get the sense that he really wanted to be part of it. So he ends up training to like try and replace, his 2 brothers to be a third Von Erich in the wrestling business.
So is the Von Erich story, is that the typical? I don't think it is. Like
No, but
in terms of the
reason I think we're going into it is because the tragedy that happened in that obviously is highlighted because of the brothers and it's one family, but that's widespread, particularly in the 80s and 90s wrestlers that we grew up and loved.
Yeah.
And the fact that you said the word stars, that's what they were. And that lifestyle contributes, in my opinion, to the passing of so many people that we loved before the age of 60, 50, 40, 30, some before the age of 30. Like that's...
Yeah. And, also, I mean, what's interesting is, when you talk about like family dynasties and wrestling, and the other ones that are comparable to the Von Erichs, there's an awful lot of tragedy in those families. The Harts, the Guerreros,
the Inouye family.
Oh yeah,
Like,
yeah.
Rosie,
The bloodline itself,
Umaga,
they have
Yokozuna.
Yeah.
It's
So,
sorry.
what are the if you were to break it down into the key causes? Drugs, lifestyle, generally I suppose that probably takes into account drugs, just body physicality, taking it out in your body week in, day out.
It's like Andre the Giant was 46 when he passed. Did you see that man? I know he had the ailment that he had,
Yeah,
giantism, or what? I know there's
gigantism.
Andre the Giantism.
Andre the Giantism. But like he was 46, and you look at some of those wrestlers, and they looked a lot older than what they were.
Yeah.
Like Davey Boy Smith, I think he was still in his 30s.
39 when he died.
Rick Rude was a 40-year-old, and he looked a hell of, in my opinion, like his body was great. He looked ripped and all that shit, but like he looked a lot older than his years because of the lifestyle.
Yeah, a lot of it genuinely is straight up down to, it's steroids and cocaine is a big part of it. And then also, I think why he
You think
possibly
Somas?
Somas in some cases, but like Somas weren't really a thing, I don't think, until the 90s.
So we have to, like, when we're saying drugs, it's not like, oh, these guys are just taking drugs. You'll have to look at the reasoning why they're taking drugs.
Yeah.
So you look at the schedule.
So
Right?
to take a typical late 80s, early 90s wrestler.
Which is like, that's the entire Sniper's Alley of like that generation of wrestlers who died young, because those were the ones who had the hardest road lifestyle. And when I say hardest road lifestyle, I don't mean just in terms of the recreational stuff that they did. I mean in terms of like, these lads are like, Vince was working those, as Bret Hart puts it, he was working those guys like circus animals.
Yeah.
Because there was A, B, and C towns. Or and touring companies. So they, especially in WWF, they'd go around and they tour. Like, so the things that people see on the television is just such a minute little amount of wrestling that they would be doing a lot of the time. A lot of the time back then, they'd tape stuff in blocks. So they'd go out month on month, and then they'd play that in a town and then say, we're coming to your town, and they'd record specific advertisements for the local television or whatever, saying we're coming to your town. So they're traveling on the road 300 plus days a year.
300 plus days a year. Plus, so, and they could be traveling 4, 5, 8, 10-hour car journeys along the way.
And they're doing this like, most of the time they're doing this like in a fucking car with their friends.
Yeah.
The guys have like a 6-pack under the fucking seat. They're drinking, they're smoking, they're doing whatever else. They're paying for that themselves. I mean, like if you're doing like 300 shots a year around fucking America, for example, and you were being taken care of in that, like, transport was taken care of, your hotel rooms were been taken care of. If you had a tour bus back
now,
in the
some
day,
wrestlers have a tour bus.
but like that's that's the shit though.
Cody
That
Express.
That's the shit that adds that adds years onto their lives, because there's so many things that they're not having to worry about that should just be like basic components of the job. Hey, like, can we have first class fucking travel?
Flights they pay for, the rental cars they pay for, they go pick it up themselves, the hotel stuff that they pay for. There's talks of, Mick Foley said when he was working for WCW, a national organization, he would share rooms with like DDP and Steve Austin. There's a great story where he left cookie crumbs in DDP's bed just for pissing him off.
I will say on that note though, like Mick Foley, I love Mick, but he is a notoriously cheap bastard. So he went out of his way to share rooms.
He's got some money from me anyway.
But it's not just so that. So you're talking about like the recreational drugs. Obviously, then they're also, so it's the physicality in the ring. Obviously, there could be 300 plus nights a year. They are hitting themselves off the mat. Painkillers come into it.
Every time you hit the mat, it's like being rear-ended by a car going 25 miles an hour. And me and Dunphy know that.
Yeah, we do know that.
We're
5 weeks.
5 weeks. We both missed a week each, but it's 4 weeks.
4 weeks.
Collectively 8.
Collectively 8, or 5, because you were at, we did share
weeks,
some insider stuff.
Yeah, fucking Misawa and Kobashi over here.
But then the other aspect of this is it's 80s, 90s wrestlers where suddenly Vince is all about body guys. So all these guys taking growth hormones,
they have to go to the gym though as well. The
I know you've got to go to the gym, but
the guys that take steroids train probably harder than...
I know, exactly. So your body is training...
Can I just add while we're on this, because you touched on it there, and I think it's really it's a big component of this that doesn't really get talked about, particularly when it comes to WWF guys. Like there's a reason, like, the likes of, say, Bruno Sammartino's generation, the people in the 60s and 70s, they didn't have those problems. Now, I know drugs and steroids were part of that, but a big thing that a lot of wrestlers have identified from that era, a big change that happened that really, really affected them in this regard, was in and around, I think, like 1986, when Vince McMahon, he signed that the deal for what was effectively Saturday night's main event.
Yeah.
Which I think was with NBC, and the guy who was running that who was running that broadcaster, it's a guy called Dick Ebersol, and Dick Ebersol famously told Vince, he goes, hey, like these rings sound terrible. And this was at a time where WWF was up in their production values, and they were kind of, they were changing how they shot and how they filmed and how they lit and operated TV wrestling.
You go back looking at that TV wrestling, it still fucking stands up. Like, it's so cinematic the way it's shot. It's so picturesque, and that's very tough for live television.
Oh yeah, definitely. But like, I mean, they massively upgraded it. But then what they did was they, under Dick Ebersol's recommendation, they changed the rings, and the rings became apparently like fucking concrete all of a sudden. So all the way through the late 80s, all the way through the 90s, I think they kind of changed it. They changed the nature of the rings. I think maybe like late 90s, early 2000s.
The way the ring is
But
set
the ring
up,
was just fucking hard. So these dudes all of a sudden from the mid 80s on are landing on much harder rings and fucking breaking themselves up.
the way the rings are set up is so there's like a spring in the middle, then there's like steel beams all around it and steel beams that go across it. On top of the steel beams, there's plywood, and then on top of the plywood, that's what you'll hear when you hear someone hit the mat. It's the plywood hitting the steel and then bouncing and reverberating. And on top of that, there's a layer of foam, and then there's the ring mat. That's what goes over it. So whether they took away a good
Layer
bit
of foam. You're
go-
talking like an inch of
yeah,
foam.
but like the foam can be as big as you want, but like obviously the more that you take away, the more impact that you're going to have on the boards, which is going to hit the steel, which is going to reverberate the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like you walk into a wrestling show and you hear the fucking ring, you're like,
Rattling.
whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like that's one of the main takeaways from it. And then to translate that.
I love the sound of these guys hurting themselves
Yeah.
when
Yeah.
they don't need to.
But it's like the difference when you used to watch the WCW show versus WF show. The WCW ring sounded amazing. I always found it's like
Apparently,
running around the place.
apparently, it was a lot easier to bump and fall in for those guys as well. Like so, yeah.
Like so the impact that it's having on these wrestlers' body, right? Obviously, the high that you're getting from going out in front of whether it's 1,000 people or fucking 93,000 allegedly at WrestleMania, you're going out in such a high, having all these people either like chant for you or boo you or whatever, just giving you all that adrenaline. Then you're going back to some fucking hotel room
Yeah.
to sleep. So you have to
Motel.
drive 8 hours the next day or that night. Ain't no fucking way that's happening. There's no way you're going to be able to come down from that type of high.
Yeah.
So either you're taking something to make you sleep or you're going out partying.
It's like Chris Jericho famously, after he won the Undisputed title, came back to his hotel room and got locked out of his room. And the guy at the desk wouldn't believe that, because what happens in wrestling is everyone who's on the early card go home, obviously, to get an early night. So the main event, sometimes there's only like 20 people in the back left, and you come out, you don't get a big round of applause or anything. So Jericho had his luggage, he got locked out of his room, basically had to show the guys at the desk the Undisputed title to prove that he was Chris Jericho from TV.
And then had a pizza.
Had a pizza, got ordered in, had a pizza.
Mick Foley shared his room with, I think, the Blue Meanie, and got a Chinese
After
winning the world title for the first time.
But like in the 80s, you're going to have all these fucking guys.
Back to the hotel.
Yeah, back to the hotel, coming off a high.
There's parties in those rooms.
Ring rats on tap.
Ring rats, right? So that was a term that was used to describe groupies, basically.
Yeah.
And these fucking in shape, buff dudes that are just absolutely testosterone driven.
Coked up to the hilt
Oh, like how?
in some cases.
And that's happening.
Allegedly.
And that's happening nearly every night.
Nearly every night, yeah. So that's a factor. Key factor?
100%.
Massive factor. It, like, I mean, I think if you're on the road 300 days a year, and if you're drinking
Having women-
or drugging, like
and having women throw themselves at you.
women take years off your life.
Yeah, but it's not just even after. Like these guys are going out there sometimes absolutely fucked off on their like Hawk, yes,
At SummerSlam 92.
yes.
He was shit-faced.
Jim-
Davy Boy Smith was just after coming off a month crack binge when he did the main event. of
Yes,
SummerSlam.
exactly.
Him and Jim Neidhart were
Neidhart.
fucking smoking crack for a month leading up to
92
one of the-
SummerSlam.
He got
It's the
sick under
greatest
the
main
ring.
events of all time.
Some crack that would have been. No, it wouldn't have been. It would have been horrible. And now
God.
Davy Boy is passed because of that lifestyle.
As has
And
Jim.
Jim.
As has
Yeah,
Jim, yeah.
Jim got decent innings, but like Jim was a heavy partier. As
Still
well.
what, 50,
Oh
60?
no, I think in his 60s.
Was he,
I
yeah?
think, yeah.
Yeah, Hawk. Like if
But like 60 is still young,
Yeah.
modern
do you
days.
ever
yeah.
watch wrestling with somebody else and they're like, "Oh, where's that guy now?" He's like, "Oh,
Dead.
he's dead.
Yeah.
Oh, he's dead."
Which WrestleMania is it that there's like 90%?
No, Royal Rumble. Like even Royal Rumble 2000, you look at it and you're like, "There's Grandmaster Sexay. Oh, he
Dead.
died. He's passed."
Big Vis, dead.
Crash Holly gone.
Test, gone.
Yeah, it's fucking nuts.
Yeah, I mean,
Big Boss Man gone.
you mean the toll it took on these guys' bodies, and I think Darren Claw does a very good job of demonstrating that as well. But it also demonstrates that kind of glamorous side of it as well, because the Von Erichs, for example, were like teen heartthrobs in Texas for years. Like they were famous. They were beloved. You
They're
know,
like
they had-
One Direction.
Yeah,
The
you know,
way
they're
they
like a big boy band, and I think that's a very intoxicating lifestyle in and of itself. You know, you go into town, everybody knows who you are. People are buying you drinks. People are offering you, you know, party favors. You know, there's women all around you.
Then Ric Flair walks in, biting around for everyone, and he'd be giving out the
Pants
whole.
off straight away.
He'd give out like where
Crystal.
I'm staying in the Marriott. No, everyone over 18 to 30 something. Don't bring your boyfriends or whatever. He used to say it on TV, and then women would show up. Or did you ever hear Jake
And he's
Roberts
famously still alive.
Yeah. Did you ever hear Jake Roberts on Beyond the Mat?
Oh yeah.
Jake Roberts in Beyond the Mat. He's mad into his crack. And he talks about like he was wrestling at WrestleMania 3 with the biggest attendance, and then he's in some fucking hall pissing in a bin, having to go out and can barely move. In Nebraska, I think
Nebraska, yeah.
And he's like
it's a massive contrast.
and he's had like his fucking life leading up to that. His dad was a rapist, a pedophile. His sister was murdered. So he had a lot of mental issues getting into the business. So when he had the chance to indulge in that kind of stuff, and the reason why I brought it up is the sexual aspect of it. He says you're meeting these girls, and then you're doing one at a time, then you're doing it two at a time, and then he says you're doing two at a time, but I'll watch. And then when it comes time to go home and make love to your wife, it ain't happening. Because he can't get, like, he's after overstimulating himself out on the road with all the fucking drugs that he's doing, with all the women that he's involved with. When he comes back home and tries to have a normal relationship, that's so far beyond from what he's doing.
Yeah, I mean, but that was the thing with a lot of them, you know.
Because divorce is rife. Ric Flair's on his fourth, fifth wife.
But that is America in
like,
general, though.
Back in that era as well, like these guys were leaving their family for like, you know, a month, 2 months at a time. Not even going out, living on the road. It's not like nowadays where everything can be documented or somebody can ring you, or like they're traveling the country. No one, like the families don't know where they're. Yeah,
like Bret Hart, the guy that you love so much.
Sunny days.
Did you reading his autobiography? Like he's basically just talking about all the women as well. Like, and it's a really good book.
Sting was a hound as well.
Was he?
Yeah.
Stinger.
Sting.
The Stinger.
Still going. Just retired recently.
Don't want to take the luster off his recent retirement, but you know, yeah, I think that stuff was prevalent. Ted DiBiase as well. You won't be surprised with DiBiase, in fairness. But yeah, I think like infidelity was a big part of it. But like, nobody was really
dying from infidelity.
Nobody was dying from infidelity. You know, I think a lot of it was like. It was that. I mean, even think
but
like
you're pushing boundaries.
But you are pushing boundaries. But also, like the addiction is definitely. I mean, Jake was an addict.
But it's also.
But as Jake will say, he wasn't a body guy. He wasn't a steroid guy.
But it's the environment as well. So like, if there's 20 lads in the room and you're the only guy not doing it, at some point you'll get weak along the road because of the. So like, it's so accessible. Yeah, peer pressure, accessibility.
Triple H never drank.
There's doctors. No. There's like they all have their own personal doctors who prescribe them absolutely anything they want. Like it's a different world. None of them are tapped into the real world. It's just this.
Yeah. I think like, you know, Bret Hart used to talk about how, you know, there was like, you know, different little cliques based on the drugs and stuff that people were into. And Bret said that, you know, one of the worst things that happened in the WWF locker room was when they banned weed, because there was a strong contingent of weed smokers. Yeah, because guys would go back to their hotel room. And Bret being a bit of a weed smoker himself, they go back, they'd smoke weed, they'd talk shit, they'd fucking, I don't know, eat some cheese puffs, whatever they're doing. And that's it, they go to bed. Yeah. Whereas when weed got banned, all of a sudden, all these guys are going out, they're drinking more, they're spending more time in the bar. Because, you know, they need something to simmer down with. Yeah. They need something to kind of relax. Yeah.
Like, did you see the story with Ric Flair and Roddy Piper? I think they went to like Puerto Rico maybe. Flair got paid like 25 grand and Piper got paid in coke. So he just fucking snorted all this fuck.
Piper was in every clique and he enjoyed every type of drug.
Yeah. And now he's gone.
He's gone as well.
Yeah.
What age is he?
And that
40.
I've seen his 50s, definitely. 50, maybe 60s.
Roddy Piper, right?
50 on the dot, was he?
Jesus, no. Roddy Piper was he was 61, 62.
Was he? Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought there was a famous story about an age where he said he would. He
said before I'd be dead before I'd be 60.
Before he said
65, and he was.
Oh yeah, okay. I suppose. Okay, so the culture that's there is not exactly I mean, Vince isn't stopping. Vince obviously into his workouts. He's a body guy himself. He loves bodybuilders.
Their story of Vince is like showing up at parties shit-faced and taking like a fucking heart fucking foundation move.
Yeah.
But the thing with that story was that story was when I think it was in 1991 where like the steroid scandal started brewing, and Vince fucking knew that the jig was up. So basically, there was like one kind of designated night where they were like, everybody, all your drugs, fucking take them. Take everything. Get fucking steamed.
And, like an amnesty.
No, it was like the purge of fucking like late 80s, early 90s, like wrestling, drink, and drug culture. Where Vince was like,
it's done after this, like,
hey, for the first time, we're going to have to bring in random testing. So like, get it all out now. And they went on an insane bender. Loads of people hit Vince with their fucking finishers. Hercules Hernandez lost his job because of it, because he got a little bit too smart and he was like, we can beat up Vince. It's like, I'm going to fucking deck him with a power slam. And he hit him so hard, apparently, that Vince, in his drunk and drugged up state, still managed to remember it.
Oh, fuck.
And fired Hercules the next day.
Hercules passed then as well.
Hercules, who was a man. Yeah, that man was full of steroids.
A man mountain of a fella.
Yeah. I mean, but you can see that particularly the guys in the 80s, the guys who were really fucking puffed up on steroids.
Warlord is still around.
How? I don't fucking know.
Yeah.
I think that's
Lex
maybe
is
because
still alive.
Lex is still, but like you're right. So did you ever look at that documentary, Bigger, Faster, Stronger, that looks into steroid abuse? So the guy that did it, his brother was a wrestler, Mike Bell. He's the one that actually got bet up by Perry Saturn, that made Saturn become
that jobber,
yeah. Which is a video available on the Wrestling Fan Wrestling Show. But Mike Bell was the jobber, and they were talking about steroids and stuff. But he passed recently. But I don't know if it was from steroids. But
see, it's not just
like
one
the actual
thing. It's this whole combined system, ecosystem of.
That's why I don't think it's fair to say that steroids did that to them when the whole culture was. Fucking wake up in the morning after being shit-faced the night before, go work out.
None of these guys are getting tests to see, do I have a heart condition that could be affected by all.
Go work out, drive fucking 4 hours, check into a place, go out, fucking perform in front of a load of people, then fucking party all night.
Go to my mate's funeral.
Go to my friend's funeral and repeat.
Go to one of many funerals I will have to attend this year for people I know.
Someone said it recently, Hulk Hogan, he said, I just stopped going to funerals. Because I'd be going to him the whole time.
He's a piece of shit. That's
like
what? Like fuck him. Like
classic Hogan.
You know what a fucking get. What a get out of jail card.
Brother.
Oh, sorry, brother.
It doesn't work for me.
Your funeral doesn't work for me.
What you gonna do, brother?
Like
that's just him. He's looking for a reason not to go to funerals.
Okay, like not everybody could probably make every funeral, but plenty of people made a fucking damn good fist of trying to do it. That fucking piece of shit was just looking for an excuse.
100%. Yeah.
Fuck him.
I just stopped going to funerals, brother. It's just too many of them.
I noticed it, like when they're making videos and I'm talking about Hogan, there's always someone that's like that piece of shit.
Well, you talk about it. You talk about a guy who was the poster boy for steroids for many reasons. Because he was right up to the last, and he was the most prominent star of the 80s and 90s. His vitamins.
He'd prayed he'd get so big.
He prayed to get fucking massive. Yeah,
massively racist.
He's a piece of shit. And we lost some good people,
and we've lost some bad people as well. Jimmy fucking.
We haven't lost Hogan.
Jimmy Snuka.
Are we getting to the murders?
No. So the murders. So there's an important distinction, right?
Murders is a whole other episode.
No, but like the lifestyle of that contributes to it. So you're wearing a Brody top, Bruiser Brody. He got stabbed.
Bro, this is Brody Lee.
I know that's Brody Lee, but I just the name Brody. That was the segue.
Sorry.
So,
good segue,
Brody got stabbed in fucking Puerto Rico, wasn't it?
In the showers.
Yeah, he got stabbed while within the rest. It was over money or something like that.
It's a contentious one. Generally, the vibe is that he had a stake in a promotion there. They felt he was like encroaching on their allegedly some Puerto Rican promoters.
Deep state.
Maybe Carlos Colon and friends.
Definitely.
But
100%.
somebody was like, he was a problem for.
Then they named the guy.
And this is I'm going to get sued by Carlos Colon.
Carlito.
And Carlito, please don't.
He's going to spit in your face.
Putting our pod on the map. The colognes.
Gonna get sued by a lot of people after this pod.
All of these opinions expressed are independent of the
And, and completely John's on it.
Just conjecture.
Yeah.
Just general theories.
allegedly.
But you know, he was buying into the Puerto Rican territory, and they thought he was going to be a big problem. He was a big star. He had a particularly fearsome reputation, and you kind of get the vibe that a couple of guys just got their heads together and be like, "Hey, somebody just stick a knife in this motherfucker," and that's what they did. And they presented it as if Jose Gonzalez. Super invader. They framed it as like Brody attacked him and it was self-defense. But everybody who's in that locker room,
Tony Atlas,
Tony Atlas, Dutch Mantel, all these guys were just like, they went in to talk, and this fucking dude just stabbed Brody, and then the ambulance didn't show up for 40 minutes.
Gino Hernandez.
Gino
Hernandez. No, that was mafia related, was it, or mob related?
It's officially a drug overdose for Gino Hernandez. But if you watch a Dark Side of the Ring episode, it infers a lot that there was mob connections, and it might have been some kind of mob hit, like Dino Bravo, who absolutely cigarette smuggling up in fucking Quebec, and the mob shot him 8 times in the head.
So Jimmy Snuka, who we mentioned, who is dead, was never convicted of the murder.
He would have been convicted like a motherfucker if he wasn't senile.
He was getting there, yeah.
Nancy Argentino?
Yeah.
So
no, I mean, I don't think it's it's not so much conjecture. I think
Snuka can't come after us.
But the whole fucking industry. So basically, that this is in our Vince McMahon fucking documentary. Basically, it's thought that he was able to get out of it due to his connection with being an entertainer.
Yeah,
like a big briefcase of money might have shown up.
Vince might have been involved.
And like Afan Sika have come out, I think, and said that like they'd get a parking ticket and pretend that they couldn't speak English, and they'd be wild Samoans, and they'd get out of the tickets based on that.
That's great though.
That's fun.
Getting out of murder based on that.
Those two and Hogan did a night in the fucking cells one time because they had a gun that was found on them. They had a license for it, but they wouldn't tell the cops that they had a license for it because they didn't want to fucking break kayfabe. Yeah. So the two of them and Hogan had to spend the night in the cells, and Hogan was like, just tell them, brother.
This doesn't work for me, brother.
No.
Yeah. I'm not going to go to your funeral.
The time Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik got caught with coke in the car, and they were riding,
and a bit of hash.
And they were riding together, got caught with drugs in the car. But the bigger news story of it was that Hacksaw Jim Duggan and the Iron Sheik, two mortal enemies, because one is Iranian and one is all-American hero.
They were feuding at the time.
They were feuding and they were riding together in the car. But that was the big story, not the big massive drug bust.
Well, they both got fucking fired for that. Yeah, that was still when kayfabe was a thing.
That's what they got in trouble for, though. So they didn't get in trouble because you got caught with coke. You got in trouble because you were both together, and one guy's a bad guy and one guy's a good guy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Maybe I don't know. Maybe that I am putting a bit of
talking a lot about kayfabe here, guys. Let's talk about death.
Yes.
Murders.
Yeah, death of
suicides.
Iron Sheik passed away there recently.
That man famously did tons of cocaine for many years.
Famously. You can say that with practically every wrestler. Famously,
this random wrestler was a cocaine fiend. They all were.
So have we?
Sheiky Bibby wasn't young though.
Have we established?
No, he had a great run, all things considered.
Have we somewhat established why they die young?
Well, we've spoken about painkillers and
well, I don't think we went into the painkillers too much. So somas became a big deal in the 90s.
Well, let's talk
about somas.
We veered into a little bit of like murders and stuff, and I think like murders and accidents.
Should we finish murders and mysteries?
Murders and accidents and suicides and mob hits are probably a whole other different like spectrum of this.
Yeah.
Whereas I think in terms of like say the Von Erichs and a lot of the wrestlers we're talking about.
Like I suppose you could probably.
Dino Bravo shot 8 times in the head by the
I know. Sorry, I know there's
Gino Hernandez.
I know there's more than enough murders
Ricky
for one
Dozan,
industry.
the most famous Japanese wrestler of all time.
But when you look
by
at
the Yakuza.
No, I know in terms of industry,
Japanese mob.
There's a hell of a lot of murders. But when we're talking about all the dead wrestlers, it's not that most of them are getting murdered.
And no far. We could do a murder episode.
They're being murdered by the businessman.
But I think in line with what we're talking about with the Iron Claw and the Von Erichs, talking about the lifestyle and the fact that like the vast majority of these wrestlers that we loved from the 80s and the 90s and even into the 2000s were completely cut down in their prime by the lifestyle.
Like
I think they're just dying. Like it's like they're 42. You find out, you wake up some morning.
Big Boss
Big
Man.
Vis is dead. Why did he die? Probably heart condition.
Big Boss Man, gone. Mr. Perfect, gone.
Heart.
Gone.
Both heart? Rick Rude heart?
Yeah. Rick Rude did.
Rick Rude, Ultimate Warrior,
Heart
Macho
attack.
Man.
Little bit older, but yeah, definitely contributed. Like,
Yeah, Roddy Piper.
Macho Man heart attack?
probably contributed.
I
Macho
think
Man, Macho
he
Man,
had incident
Macho
while
Man
driving.
definitely. Macho Man was a heart attack. Ultimate Warrior was definitely a heart attack.
But like, there's having heart
Mr.
attacks in your 80s and there's having heart attacks in your 30s. So
Yeah.
like, what is, it's lifestyle. It's the drugs.
It's probably lifestyle. I mean, look, like, you know, like there's like certain people we talked about. There is like, you talk about someone like Viscera and also someone like Yokozuna. I mean, their weight is a massive component in that.
Yeah.
Big dudes.
John Tenta, Earthquake.
John Tenta, he died of bladder cancer.
Famously aged in reverse.
He did. Like go and look at a picture of John Tenta when he was 25, and you
mean,
were
John
Just-
John Tenta wasn't a steroid guy. He was a family man. It wasn't a
Sumo
big
wrestler?
partier. It was a
Did
sumo
you see his
wrestler.
Dark Side of the Ring?
No.
Neither have I, but by all accounts, it's just like,
A lovely guy.
yeah, he was a gentleman. There's nothing
Lovely
really
guy,
dark
you-
about this
like-
at all.
But that's the thing, like you know, like
They're running out of shit to talk.
lovely dudes die because you know there's certain illnesses or there's you know like
Brody Lee.
accidents. Brody Lee, you know, yeah, like
That was his lungs.
it was his lungs, yeah, and it's the same as well. Like yeah, I think Yokozuna
I was going
had
to make some kind of vaccine joke there, but I said it would veer well away from that.
Yokozuna as well. It wasn't a heart attack as people you know generally presume. I think it was kind of it was some kind of like lung embolism or something that. But obviously his weight was a
Yeah.
massive factor in that.
Andre is obviously a
Gross.
Russian,
Yeah.
Yeah, I
but
mean,
like the stories of him and you know the beer drinking and like the
like
mass amount of
Andre's
pressure.
love of drinking 120 bottles of beer in one fell swoop probably wouldn't have prolonged his life greatly.
Didn't help.
Didn't help, you know.
But like that man was constantly in pain. Like Jack Roberts said, he'd get to a hotel room, the hotel bed would be too small for him.
Hey,
He'd
boss.
have to shit in a bathtub.
Shit in the bath, shit on like basically lay a sheet out on the bed that you could shit into, and then just wrap up that shit in a blanket. And that's
Brilliant,
Andre.
man.
He's just walking around with
That's a collector.
blankets of shit.
That's a collector's item nowadays. I have 100 a giant shit sheet.
Shit sheet.
You'd really want to be really preserving that very well in order for it to have any value nowadays. And I also would never want to own that.
I
shit
would like
sheet.
it. I'd like to have one right there. Send the back wall.
If anyone out there has an Andre the Giant shit sheet that they want to part with, Shane will pay really good money.
I will. If you like the Shroud of Turin.
We could put it here instead of this nice black thing.
Ooh. So getting back on course with this episode about
dead wrestlers.
dead wrestlers.
Oh,
Yeah.
all
So
my heroes are gone.
So where are we going to now?
Into-
Suicides?
I think
let's save murders and suicides and mob hits for maybe there's another episode we can do on that.
Louis Spicoli with the painkillers.
So somas were a big thing in the fucking 90s. And the thing about like when Shawn Michaels was the fucking king of somas for a period. He was down in them left, right, and center. Had a pretty decent constitution for them in fairness. But he was constantly
Cost him his smile.
He cost him his smile, that and have the shit kicked out of him by a couple of Marines. But
he so did.
but the thing with somas became like, you know, this big this drug that really caught on in the 90s. Was very popular in the ECW locker room, became very popular in the WWF locker room. And Michaels was always warned that he was going to become the new Louis Spicoli if, you know, he kept going with him. And thankfully, you know, he kicked the habit, found God,
Wrestled with tagged with God at Backlash.
literally tagged with God.
Yeah.
Somas
Cleanse
were
his
Did someone
rap
kill
sheet.
as many people then? Like, did you ever see Davey Boy Smith, like, when he's fucked off his face in a WCW cutting a promo on Alex Wright?
he just somaed up to the
He
gills.
just looks so blown up. His face is all red. He doesn't know what the fuck he's saying. And he's on national TV.
Dave Boy Smith, British Bulldog, what age was he when he died?
39.
39, yeah.
39.
Like, so I know he probably had a lot of problems anyway, but stemming from an injury on a trapdoor that was in a wrestling ring.
Yeah.
The Ultimate Warriors
His back.
stupid ass trapdoor that they used in WCW
96, 97?
98.
98.
Davey Boy was slammed on it and it fucked up his back, and that kind of increased. Now, in fairness, look, Davey and Dynamite were fiends for everything. Like you know, Dynamite Kid in the 80s was literally injecting himself with fucking horse steroids. Like, those guys were taking way more steroids than they should have. They were partying like flat out. They were fucking on coke and whatever else.
Sorry, we didn't. So just sorry but we haven't really delved into why. Like they're taking all these painkillers because they are forced to work injured all the time. Like as in you can't if you,
That's a good point.
Yeah.
So you've got this real double-edged sword of they're working injured and they want to make their shows, so they're doused up on painkillers.
If you don't make the shows, you don't get paid.
Yes.
And if you're not on the shows, someone takes your spot.
And then also
it's gonna happen to you
and then also like steroids, and this feeds into the Vince McMahon being a piece of shit narrative. When he was brought up, when that trial happened in 1994, the implication was that Vince was, and he got away with it because he's fucking Vince. He was at that point Teflon, not anymore. But Vince kind of got away with it. But there was a lot of there was a lot of conjecture that Vince McMahon was forcing his guys to take steroids, and even if Vince wasn't telling them you have to take steroids, he was always implying it.
Yeah.
And there's a famous story where
well, he started his own bodybuilding company at one stage, which probably didn't help.
And he's an absolute fucking steroid freak himself.
That's why he brought Lex Luger in for your boy.
Apparently he had a fridge in Titan Towers that was just constantly been stacked up with whatever Dr. George Zahorian was sending in weekly, and then Vince was doling them out to the boys.
Yeah.
Apparently.
Allegedly.
But there's a story where like Rick Rude, who was like obviously on steroids, but the dude had he had an amazing physique. It was literally his gimmick, He's like, here's the physique.
He's ravishing.
He's ravishing. No woman can resist it. But there was a period in the late 80s where
six pack on his dick.
Where and actually that's really appropriate for what I'm about to say, because Rick Rude wanted to have kids, and Rick Rude went to Vince McMahon and he was like, hey man, he's like, me and my wife, we're trying to have a baby. It's really hard to have a kid when you're on steroids. It makes conceiving a little bit harder. I'm just going to get off the gas for a couple of months. And Vince was like, well, okay, if that's what you want to do, but gonna, implying that you're going to get de-pushed. And he got fucking de-pushed. In the same way, this is not to his steroids.
WCW then, was it?
Yeah, he ended up going, but like the dude was like, hey, I'm juiced up to the fucking gills. I look great. I work out hard. Can I just try and impregnate my wife? Can you just give me like 3 months or something? And Vince was having none of it. And like
3 months.
This comes out. I mean, look, this is a whole other separate issue of the lack of paternity care there as well, because like because Ricky Steamboat had
It's a whole other episode.
It's a whole other episode. Ricky Steamboat was forced to drop the Intercontinental title because like he wanted to go home and
be a dad.
He wanted to go. His wife had just given birth, and he just was like, "Can I just go home and help my wife who's just giving birth for a while?"
Shut the fuck up.
And he's like, you're lying down for the honky tonk, man.
Yeah, you get to Minnesota right now, you piece of shit.
Yeah.
Oh my God. Yeah. So they used to work injured to protect their spot, to make sure they wouldn't get demoted. So they would take more and more painkillers.
Can you imagine that though? Like, you're the Intercontinental Champion and you're looking over there's the fucking fat baby honky tonk man dressed as the Elvis impersonator.
And you were like Ricky Steamboat, and you're like, this motherfucker? I just had the best match ever against Randy Savage.
Yeah, like, what the fuck, bro?
I just want to check my wife is okay.
And you're going to have this fat Elvis. But fatter than fat Elvis.
Wait, was Ricky Steamboat or Rick Rude?
We went into Steamboat.
I moved into Steamboat because I was talking about issues, Vince McMahon's issues with like dudes just wanting to fucking mind their baby and their wife, or have a baby,
but like
with their wife.
Bam Bam, another person that passed away. Like, you seen his dark side of the ring where they were talking about
man, so sad.
He like not being around his family, and that's a fucking constant thing. Even Dusty Rhodes, who's passed away there, like we all know the story of Dustin and how he brought up and the problems that he had with his dad. Ric Flair had a lot of problems with his kids.
It's also, and there's that, and then there's also like the lack of healthcare that they have. Like, so they're like, Kamala has no feet anymore.
No, he's dead.
I know he's dead now.
He has no feet to the extent that he is dead.
He's no feet so much. So much does he not have feet that he is dead.
But like, there's no union.
There's no union.
There's no union.
Thanks to who?
No
Thanks
pension.
to who, guys?
Hulk Hogan.
Fucking Terry himself.
No union.
The boulder wasn't moving, boys.
No.
So Jesse Ventura, that's a whole other episode into it, talking about Minnesota. He's the governor of Minnesota. That was I could sometimes do the impression.
Yeah, Jesus, yeah. Trying to do a good Jesse Ventura.
Minnesota.
He nearly got
Jesse
it.
Conspiracy theories.
Yeah. He bust the union on all the boys.
So there's no healthcare.
Yeah, no pensions.
No pensions.
No union.
No union. Well, except for that brief period in 99
Where they were
Big Show.
Mankind, Ken Shamrock and Test formed the
The
union.
union, yeah.
And they were treated like absolute jobbers.
Dirt.
That they were. They had 2x4s as their fucking the weapon of choice for some reason.
Yeah.
Yeah, but like here's
But
the
these
thing.
like world famous guys, like Lex Luger, world famous. Lex Express tried summer '94, body slammed Yokozuna.
Do you know what?
He's now in a wheelchair, and the only reason that he is probably alive is
because he had his own tour bus.
Also, I think religion seems to have helped him in
But
some way.
he also was there when Miss Elizabeth died.
Dark shit.
He had his own tour bus.
He had his own tour bus.
This is why Cody. This is why Cody and the boys are going to live long and prosper.
Well, like
Give him a tour bus.
you
they'll all
have
live
the
long
Undertaker
now.
talking about him now. They don't all live long now.
My legacy.
Like you have Undertaker calling them all soft now because they want to play video games. They don't want to go out and fucking
fuck
party
the
and-
Undertaker.
and
Yeah.
drink fucking Jack Daniels and
Well, Kenny's probably going to retire now because he's they're soft, but they're also
like they're different.
They're,
They're different
they
people.
go
they're reckless.
harder.
Yeah, they're
I mean,
reckless in
when,
different
like,
ways.
okay, they're not maybe doing 300 like shows a year, but like the standard for the modern wrestler now is so much that but these guys they wrestle such a harder style. So like Kenny mightn't wrestle a ton of matches, but when he does, he's going to wrestle like the hardest fucking match
Plus
anyone's
there's,
wrestled.
plus, there's an argument that they're not doing enough reps in the ring, so they're going to get injured more.
So where's this change happening though? Because the 90s, the lifestyle is so fucking still prevalent. Still in the 2000s as well.
Yeah, to a degree. So I mean, I think drug testing really obviously helped out. I think that is definitely a thing nowadays.
That was introduced when Eddie passed.
Yeah, so Eddie Guerrero, when Eddie Guerrero died, but the thing with Eddie is like it wasn't like he was
36, man.
38.
38.
Yeah, but it
Bray
wasn't.
was 36.
Who?
Bray. He
Yeah,
was 36.
yeah,
So
yeah.
Eddie, like I found that really, because when you're living in that time period, say the Attitude Era and stuff, you kind of hear secondhand when people pass away.
Yeah.
Like it's not as prevalent as it was now, as it is now. When someone passes away, you're like, "Oh, did you hear the Big Boss
You hear
man
it,
passed away?"
yeah, you hear it instantly.
Yeah, they might be gone from the business or whatever. They mightn't be wrestling on a
Virgil, for example.
like they're. But Eddie passed away.
Virgil was like 70 though.
Well, like I suppose no.
that's a good run for a
Brian
wrestler.
Pillman fucking passed
Pillman,
away.
Jesus, how can you talk to Pillman?
Why? While he's an active wrestler in WWF.
Pillman was like, okay,
Was that like the first time?
everybody's got like shades of the things, whereas like Pillman was like steroids,
Check.
drug use,
Check.
injured,
Check.
painkillers,
Check.
driving really fast all the fucking time, living your gimmick.
Check.
Yeah.
Like
He crashed.
Got a
Like,
gun. Check.
literally had a gun. Yeah, shot a man on live television.
Check.
Check.
Check. He's
Lived his gimmick.
Lived his gimmick.
Well, even then, I don't think it. I was too young to say that it impacted me a whole lot because I didn't understand. I was only about fucking 6 when Pillman passed, so I didn't really understand it. Owen, I did understand.
Owen Hart, yeah.
Owen passed away, and I know what you're saying. That's a freak accident or whatever, but at the same time, like he passed away in the ring,
Yeah.
falling to the ring,
Whole new category.
doing wrestling, like, well, not even doing wrestling, being part of this show and
Doing
being
Vince's wrestling.
and living that fucking lifestyle to the max. Because we're talking about, constantly needing to progress. Whether that's in like you'll see that naturally with drug taking, you'll see that naturally with sex. In wrestling industry, they're pushing boundaries constantly, and having someone come from the rafters, that wasn't happening in the early 90s. That was happening because they needed another type of shock.
Exactly.
on your screen.
It was an escalation of the Monday Night War, and it was also a big reason why these guys were like
Yeah, well, Sting
pushing
was
themselves.
doing it week in, week out. So it's not like it was the first time it was ever
But
done.
it was still
But-
part. It was still part of the same competitive culture where you have like these two massive companies, like they're offering, well, more so in the case of WCW, but really lucrative contracts. Wrestlers are also trying to like do everything they can to get the big money contracts, to get the promotions, to get the pushes, to get the titles. So like in full circling it around to the Von Erichs. I mean, that level of like what existed around the NWA heyday in terms of the pressure and the standards that were there. By the time you get to the late 90s, like that is amped up to the fucking height of it. Like,
Yeah.
because also, I mean, the NWA champions throughout the, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, they weren't doing fucking weekly television twice a week as well, on top of like a full calendar of live shows.
It's
Insane pressure.
Yeah, it's insane pressure, and I think that contributed to the Owen Hart tragedy that happened. But then, spate of wrestlers pass without you really noticing.
Yeah.
Because of Mr. Perfect passes away.
Crash Holly
Test. Passes away. Testa was a bit more prevalent too because it was after Eddie. So Eddie, I remember when Eddie hit.
Eddie is your big one.
Eddie's the one where
Eddie is the one, and I think if you're into the what ifs,
this isn't like the one
place to start.
The one that made me saddest or anything. This is just the one that I was most conscious of because I was almost an adult or I was growing up, and I was like, this guy, I just seen him go up against Mr. Kennedy, and what the fuck do you mean he's gone?
That was Eddie's was devastating, and it's a sad thing about Eddie.
All sad.
They're all sad, but like I think that the thing with Eddie's as well, Eddie had really worked so hard to turn a corner. As far as I can, he was probably very roided up when he died. You could see with the muscle mass that he put on. For a guy with such a small frame to have that level of muscle mass,
upper body, crazy.
It really wasn't great. But he wasn't abusing drugs and he wasn't abusing alcohol. He really turned his life around. He was having a good run. He was due to be made the world champion for the second time in in a matter of weeks. Professionally, he was really riding high. Personally, he was back with his wife. Everything was going good for him. So it was like this guy had defeated his demons, and then
it felt so unfair.
He's just gone. Yeah,
and Eddie would have been someone as well. I think is a big thing to point out that I would have grown up with. So I remember him in WCW. I remember his feuds with Rey Mysterio. I remember the LWO. I remember the Radicals. I remember Latino Heat. I remember the Los Guerreros coming.
Yeah.
His tag team with Tajiri, all that. One of the best moments ever in wrestling when he beats Brock Lesnar. I remember all that. And then he's gone. And you're like, what? Wait, what? And he was just there.
And that was kind of the stuff. I suppose that's 2005. So there was subsequent to that. I mean, a lot of people have died since, obviously, but there was a real slowdown. And WWE, to their credit, really tried to slow down just because, those tragedies were not doing the business any good.
Yeah.
Let alone
that's probably the number one for Vince.
Well, for Vince, of course it is. Well, it's fucking money. It's the ultimate thing. But they really did try to institute a completely different policy. In terms of drug testing, in terms of taking care of the talent a little bit more.
Plus taking in even wrestlers who were no longer with the company whatsoever. Like if you had any degree of needing help, you were assisted all of a sudden.
You were paid for rehab.
Yeah, they became like the kind of the they were, no matter, I suppose it's like America in the world, in the early 2000s, they were like the protector of the entire industry. So they would take in anybody really if you had an issue.
Yeah. But that's the thing. But then you got, then even within that, as much as they were trying, there was the guys who kind of fell through the cracks, like someone like Umaga. Again, from another, wrestling dynasty. He was a guy who they tried to get him into rehab and he refused to go. And then
same with Kurt Angle. Kurt Angle refused to go.
They were like, go to rehab or we're going to fucking fire you. And these guys said, no, get fired. And then left to their own devices, dead. In Umaga's case, he was dead a couple of months after he got released. Test.
Yeah,
he was in TNA.
You can't blame the
Chris Candido.
You can't blame the entire industry.
Chris Candido, I know he had his problems with drugs, but he died because of a blood clot. That was again another. That was a guy who turned his life, like Eddie Guerrero, turned his life around, cleaned himself up, was really entering a whole new phase that was going to be very exciting, and then just fucking died of after he had surgery and then died of a blood clot.
I was a big TNA fan as well. I seen it happen with the Naturals. That's who he was managing at the time. I was like, what the fuck is going on? It's very scary. And then
Canyon, sad one.
Chris Canyon passed away. Mike fucking Awesome.
Now we're into the suicides. Now it's going to get a lot cheerier.
Yeah, Mike Awesome, and then you have fucking
Sean O'Hare.
Redacted.
I suppose another thing we haven't
redacted and redacted.
Well, so Eddie Guerrero, obviously that hurt Benoit, you'd imagine. But the CTE stuff, does that come into it? If you're talking about suicide,
the one for me that says I don't think this has been a Dark Side of the Ring episode yet. Maybe it is this season, or maybe it will be in the future. But Mike Awesome is this is a guy who was so famous for the amount of chair shots he would take. That whole feud he had with Masato Tanaka and ECW, that guy's brain must have been fucking mush.
Yeah. So from the I would say the suicides in CT are interlinked.
I mean, in terms of
Without knowing the science, but they did say Benoit's brain
was resembled like an 82-year-old Alzheimer's patient.
Now his move was he would literally jump off the top rope and headbutt you.
But also that was the thing. So like Dynamite Kid, who took that move from Harley Race, the diving headbutt, and Harley Race had said to Dynamite Kid, he was like, the one thing I regret is like pioneering that move. I really regret it. Don't do that fucking move. And Dynamite Kid, in his hubris, he fucking goes and he does it, and he kept doing it, and it really fucked him up. Like, like he had so many neck and fucking back problems stemming from that. So he goes and does it, and then Benoit, who idolizes Dynamite Kid, takes on that fucking move, and then our beloved Bryan Danielson also took on that move and did it for a long time, and
he had his brain issues,
and he's had his brain issues as well. That is just not a safe, good move to be doing.
Well, when you see
listen to Harley,
when you see the likes of pile drivers and fucking like, you don't see a burning hammer anymore. Like, you don't see people.
But you've never burning hammer's kind of like, that was like Kobashi. Kobashi only did that like 7 times in his fucking career, so it's like it's a very protected move.
They talked about Kobashi, Mitsuharu Misawa passing away.
Yeah. Well, that was a guy who just loved fucking, he loved the realism. He loved landing on his neck as hard as possible.
But like, when you're talking about moves that were banned, in the interest of safety, we have chair shots to the head that stopped pretty much after the whole Benoit stuff, I'm pretty sure. Pile drivers done, Austin breaking his neck.
Yeah. Draws
paralyzed.
That was a Sky High from Dino
Sky
Brown.
High.
That was a freak, because Draws was wearing like loads of he had a real like he had that mad fucking
tattoo,
baggy fucking
piercing,
all layers and shit. Real Galway fucking vibes on Draws in the late 90s.
Galway vibes.
But like basically. D'Lo just couldn't get any fucking purchase on him. Like, it wasn't like the move was botched. It was like, how do I lift this dude with all these layers he's wearing? That's not to put blame either way. Like, it was a tragic fucking accident, but it wasn't down to like somebody fucking a move or a particular move in itself being too dangerous,
So yeah,
freak accident.
So the CTE thing was quite.
I think like in a case of some of those, like particularly Mike Awesome's the one that really stands out for me. But I think it definitely would have, in the same way where Benoit, potentially contributed to heavy depression, in the same way that's been evidenced with a lot of NFL players. It's a lot more prevalent now in rugby as well. Like, people are talking about the effects of concussions. But in wrestling, you can see a couple of those guys, because you did commit suicide, who were not treating their skulls particularly well.
Yeah, like this is an era when you would see chair shots to the head. It's certainly every show you might see.
But now when you see it, you're like, oh shit, no.
Yeah,
because
so
people know.
I mean, Bruno Sammartino wasn't going around fucking throwing chair shots at Buddy Rogers or anything in the 60s. Like, this is is a real escalation in terms of 90s wrestling, which is when
are fans to blame then as well? Or well, because you want more. Like, when you're at a fucking wrestling match and you're like, we want fire.
ECW.
We want fire.
But like, also at the same time, like, Sabu famously kind of, like, Sabu said, like, Sabu's whole gimmick, right, was breaking tables. He's the guy who breaks tables.
Homicidal, genocidal, suicidal mania.
And Sabu said, like, his problem with how Paul Heyman booked ECW in the 90s was, like, he's like, that was his gimmick. And then, obviously, that was such a popular part of the show. And then Sabu got really pissed off when he would go and he'd do some tour for FMW or something in Japan. And then he'd hear about the ECW shows that he's not on, and that guys are fucking lobbing themselves through tables. And he's going, hey, that's my gimmick. And Paul Heyman's going like, well, the fans kind of expected. So then you got everybody throwing themselves through fucking tables.
That is wrestling.
To pop
like,
the fans.
Like, that's just... if something takes a DDT suddenly becomes an everyday move all the time, like, that just happens in wrestling.
I know,
if it's cool, it gets
spikes
stolen
in the head. Like, now that's become thumbtacks. Like, it's constant. Like,
Darby Allin.
What's the next? Darby fucking Allin, who could die in Mount Everest
this week, could die in Mount Everest, and then we can't put out this podcast, as you said earlier.
R.I.P. Darby.
Or not.
Or well done, Darby.
You're a real one.
Yeah, can we do 2 shots there, one and edit it in?
Well done, Darby.
Darby, really proud of you. That was great.
Well done, Darby.
Match is like, no.
Successfully climbing Mount Everest. So here's the thing. I think like AEW have been mostly successful for like, kind of like having their cake and eat it, but like the fans demand now a certain type of, like, AEW give them the violence a little bit more. They demand a little bit you know, they want to see certain things, but AEW kind of curated very well. Like you'll have a broken table or a glass spot or this and that, but they're not breaking them out every week.
Yeah, but their matches are quite fucking physical.
They do certain things more than they probably should. Like I watched the last episode of Collision, and like, you know, got fucking poor Mark Briscoe been put through a flaming table. And I'm like, do you need to do the flaming table spot on the fucking Saturday night show that draws 300,000 people? You know what I mean? And like, so there's a bit of that, but also like audiences can be conditioned, and you can be creative in terms of what you give them that can, you know, can satisfy their fucking bloodlust, you know. Whereas in ECW back in the 90s, it was like, you know, every match smash, like not every match, but you know, like it's chairs, it's tables, it's glass.
Throw a chair, hit a chair with a chair.
Yeah.
But like
put your chair through a chair with a chair.
That's why I love Cody, because he has a story about his matches. So we're moving on. Lance Cade, he's an early passing. We go to the 2000s. Was there? I don't particularly remember anybody from
Perfect.
Yeah, no, he was early. The mid 2000s.
No, like, but like what you're seeing there is you're seeing older. What you're seeing is like, I mean, like not a lot of guys were dropping dead in the 80s and in the early 90s. What you're talking about is like the cumulative effect of all this stuff. So a lot of these deaths are mostly happening in the late 90s throughout the 2000s,
but still too early. They're still quite early. And then like
it's the 2010 onwards that you don't really, it's like, very rare you hear it because we've gone through the era of
so is Brody the anomaly? Brody and Bray the anomalies here?
They're not just the anomalies, but like they're in every era, like a guy's going to die of natural causes. You're going to have your Adrian Adonises or your junkyard dogs, whatever. You're going to have the people who die in auto accidents.
But they were both like involved in.
Actually, that's also true.
Big John Studd, maybe. Like who?
Well, he's just a
great,
he died
great
of
Rumble winner.
That's what I'm saying. You're going to have your natural.
He died of cancer, but there. Man, a lot of it is lifestyle, but you're not going to account for the stuff that's just like a straight up, you know, an accident or it's separate health issues. I think Bray Wyatt, you know, that was a COVID issue. Brody Lee, that's a lung issue. You know, I think it's all part of a lifestyle. And one thing we haven't touched on as well is the like literally 3 of like the best, you know, women's wrestlers / personalities that era all died ridiculously young. Chyna, Sherry Martel, Luna Vachon,
Elizabeth.
Oh fuck, Elizabeth! Yeah.
Well, we mentioned
she couldn't wrestle for toffee, but she was definitely an important part.
Well, she's iconic 90s. Yeah, if you're thinking about who are the iconic women.
Yeah.
And is that
so? It's not. I think that's just consigned. Like we're talking about, like, you know, all these guys with a party lifestyle, but like these women were part of that as well. Like you know,
it is still, even though we've explained,
it's across the board. Like
it's still weird. Like even if you explain all the reasons why it happens, like, you know,
it's so much more prevalent.
Like, even, like there's loads of people who party all the time. Like it's
we're partying right now.
There's
with our zeros. Well, me
and my little fruit drink here. It's still weird. Like it's still the amount of deaths.
The sheer
in
amount,
their 30s.
The sheer amount,
we're in our 30s.
Like the life expectancy of like, but also as well, like, you know, we've been, so I know you guys are like trained seasoned professional wrestlers as well, but also we you know, we share a common
thanks Phil.
We share a common lifestyle of, you know, like the hard theater life as well, you know, where you'd go out where you'd go
to Clears,
you'd go out after you're playing, you go to Clears. But you know, like these situations in which you would be out and you would, like, you know, you drink a lot or whatever, but you're not necessarily like,
but like,
but
imagine
that's not added to like, hey, I went through a table and like,
but also fucking
was dropped on my head 5 times,
you know,
and then I have to drive 8 hours, and then I have to go to the gym
2 weeks in a row. Like if you do 2 nights in a row now drinking, like you are rode off for 2 weeks basically.
So you're gonna have to take some to get you going again.
So you can imagine, having to constantly go out, go again, keep rolling over.
Can we just, on that note, Ric Flair. Let's just get into that a little bit more, because he said that like during that period, like he wrestled harder than anyone. He lived that lifestyle. He was like, what a fucking machine. But like he was drinking every night.
Is there a little bit?
He's a straight up alcoholic.
Is there a little bit of bullshit from it?
I don't know. Because
by all accounts,
the women thing is bullshit.
Like if you
did
look
he say he was with Jessica Alba? Wasn't that he?
There's no way Ric Flair was with Jess Galloway. He would have been. He would have been. He would have been in his late
put out
50s.
that rumor. He was. I think
That's what I mean. That's what I mean.
Ric
Ric Flair.
Flair. He wasn't even that attractive in his prime. Like he's.
Fuck you. He was.
Like-
Ric Flair was a handsome man.
Feathery hair.
Yeah, feathery hair.
You've always had a thing for robes, haven't you, Shane?
I have. Yeah. Give me a Paul Orndorff robe.
Bleached white hair.
Fucking.
Bleach white hair, fucking big nose, sack of tits,
Homelander head.
Yeah.
Homelander head.
Fucking Stairmaster master. That's what he was.
I think Rick exaggerates.
Do you, like, 'cause there is, it's again, it's that, like the actor lifestyle as well, the Richard Burtons and the Peter O'Tooles and the Richard Harrises, and like the degree of kind of self-mythologizing around that. And you go, Jesus, like, could you have kept the job and drank that hard? And like really excelled at the top of your game?
Was he coming in buying shots for everyone and then buying himself a water?
But that's what Jim
That's
Ross
what they said. They used
so
to-
many people like the thing with Flair is they go, okay, fair enough, and like every interview, Flair enough.
There's a
Should have been the
fucking.
name for this podcast.
There's a real.
When we do a Flair episode,
T-shirts.
Flair enough. Flair enough, mate. But like the thing is, it's not like it's Flair himself who's going out and doing that. Like if you watch the Ric Flair kind of like the 60 for 60 documentary, that information is kind of teased out of him a little bit. He's asked about that, and then when you got all the contributors, Jim Ross particularly. Jim Ross is the one. He's I think the main proponent of the story of like just throwing the shots over your shoulder. But like, it's everybody else saying that about Rick more so than it is Rick saying it about himself.
But if Rick is the big guy, yeah, but like there is a chance that could still happen. If Rick is the world champion, he's buying everyone shots. You're probably going to be concentrating on, oh my God, Ric Flair bought me a shot. You're not going to notice Rick chucking his shot behind his back while he's.
Ric Flair is another episode because he's not dead.
He's not dead. How is he not dead?
So the crux of this episode is, how is Ric Flair not dead?
And I don't think we've answered it. But I think we've answered for the casuals that are like, oh, your podcast looks really cool, but I have no idea what the fuck you're talking about.
Yeah, let's talk about fucking a load of dead men and women for
your entertainment. I hope you enjoyed.
Is there anyone we're missing before we sign off?
I'm sure we're missing a shit ton of wrestlers.
I think if we just
famous.
run a list of dead wrestlers just down through the
Matthew,
credits here.
roll the credits. Roll it over my face, so they actually look like Patreon subscribers.
Dead patrons.
Oh God.
And if we just finish, we just like just have a just 10 bell salute, just a little bit of silence. We'll just ring the bell 10 times.
So that was the Wrestle Fan the Wrestling Show. Don't forget to like and
Nice
subscribe.
little touch there.
That's what observed. Yeah, Bar Matthew, he talked. But it was a fucking Razor Ramon, I never even mentioned.
Razor Moon.
That's been the Wrestle Fan Wrestling Show.
So many.
Like, there's so
depressing.
many.
Yeah.
It's
So
so
depressing.
sad. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you're watching on YouTube, comment below which is the most offensive part. If you're listening on Spotify, rate it. And we'll be back for another episode sometime soon.